She had always loved music. Even as a little girl, she would hum tunes while doing chores, tap rhythms on tabletops, and imagine herself performing on big stages. Her mother would smile and watch her, sometimes joining in with a little clap or hum of her own. Music had always been a bond between them, a quiet thread that made their small home feel warm and alive. But there was one thing she dreamed of more than anything: a piano. Not just any piano, but one she could sit at and play whenever she wanted. She would spend hours in music shops staring at the polished instruments, running her fingers over the keys without pressing them, imagining the melodies that might come to life. The problem was simple: they were expensive. She had no money, only the small savings she had scraped together from odd jobs and a little birthday money. At first, she thought she could never afford one. She would look at pianos that cost hundreds, even thousands, and feel a pang of disappointment. Every time she left a music shop, she felt a mix of longing and frustration. She wanted to play so badly, but her reality seemed to whisper that she was too poor, too ordinary, too young. One afternoon, while scrolling through a local marketplace online, something caught her eye. A piano, old but still intact, was listed for just $150. She almost laughed. Surely it couldn't be real. Most pianos cost 10 times that amount, and this one was being sold by a woman in the next town over. She clicked on the ad again, examining the tiny, grainy photos of the wooden frame, the slightly yellowed keys, and the small scratches along the surface. It was nothing fancy, and yet it felt right. Her heart beat faster. $150 was not a small amount for her, but it was something she could manage. It wouldn't buy a shiny new piano, but it could buy a start. She picked up the phone and called the number. The seller, a kindly older woman, assured her that the piano worked and had been in the family for decades. There was a little hesitation in the seller's voice, almost like she was parting with something precious. Her mother had been in the kitchen when she called. She overheard the conversation and raised her eyebrows. "Are you sure about this?" she asked gently. "It's secondhand. It might need repairs." "I know, Mom," she replied, her voice firm but tinged with excitement. "I can fix it if I have to. I really want this." Her mother hesitated for a moment, then nodded. "Okay, let's do it. But promise me you'll take care of it." The piano arrived a few days later. When it was placed in their small living room, it felt larger than life. She ran her fingers over the keys, testing the touch and the tone. Some notes were slightly off, a few keys stuck now and then, but overall it was perfect to her. She could almost hear the music waiting to be played. That first evening, she sat down and tried to play a simple tune she had learned from a music book. The sound was a little rough at first, uneven and hesitant, but she didn't care. She was playing a real piano, one that belonged to her in some small but meaningful way. Her mother watched quietly from the sofa, smiling as she saw her daughter's eyes light up with joy. In the following weeks, the piano became a part of their home. She practiced every day, sometimes for just a few minutes, sometimes for hours. She would stumble over difficult notes and get frustrated, but she would always come back. There were days when she wanted to quit, thinking the keys were too stiff or her fingers too clumsy. But each time she sat down, she felt a little spark of hope. One rainy afternoon, she discovered something extraordinary. She was pressing keys absent-mindedly, trying to create a melody when a chord struck a note that seemed richer than the others. She paused and played it again, listening closely. There was a depth, a warmth to the sound, unlike anything she had imagined from a $150 piano. She pressed more keys, experimenting with different combinations, and realized that the piano, though old and worn, had a soul of its own. Her mother entered the room quietly, carrying a cup of tea. She watched her daughter play, noticing the intensity in her eyes. "It sounds beautiful," she said softly. "You've really made it sing." The girl smiled, slightly embarrassed. "It's not me. It's the piano. I just touch the keys and it does the rest." Her mother laughed. "Maybe that's why it's perfect. Some things aren't about money or polish. They're about heart." That idea stayed with her. She realized that even though she had spent far less than what a real piano would cost, it didn't matter. What mattered was her love for music, her persistence, and the way she connected with this old instrument. Every note she played felt like a conversation between her and the piano, a shared understanding that transcended the scratches and imperfections. Months passed, and she grew more confident. She learned new songs, experimented with compositions, and even began to write her own melodies. The piano had become a companion, a teacher, and a source of endless inspiration. Her small investment had given her more than just an instrument. It had given her a sense of possibility. Then came the day she first learned the story that would change everything. She had been reading an article about musicians she admired, learning about their lives and the instruments they had used. One line caught her eye. A famous singer, someone she had admired since childhood, had once played a piano that looked just like hers during a studio session many years ago. She read it again, unable to believe what she was seeing. Could it be? Her heart raced. She ran to the piano and pressed a few keys, imagining the famous musician's hands touching them. She laughed nervously, almost scolding herself for getting carried away, but the thought refused to leave her. The idea that this simple $150 piano might have a history far beyond what she knew made it feel almost magical. She spent hours researching, calling the seller, and even tracing the piano's previous owners. The more she learned, the more she realized she was sitting at something extraordinary. It wasn't just an instrument. It was a piece of history. And somehow, by a mix of luck, timing, and determination, it had found its way into her home. As she played, she felt a new sense of connection. Every note she struck was no longer just her own. It was linked to the stories of those who had touched the keys before her. She imagined the famous singer sitting there, composing, experimenting, laughing, maybe even struggling with the same chords. That connection gave her courage. It reminded her that even ordinary people with ordinary means could come into contact with something extraordinary. Her mother watched her, sensing the change. "You've fallen in love with it in a new way, haven't you?" she said. "Yes," she replied, her voice soft but firm. "It's not just a piano anymore. It's like it's alive, like it has a story, and somehow it's ours now." From that moment on, the piano wasn't just a tool for practice. It became a symbol of persistence, hope, and the unexpected magic life could offer. She realized that no matter how small her budget had been, her passion and dedication had made the piano something priceless. Even when friends visited and saw the piano, they commented on its age and scratches, assuming it was just a cheap second-hand instrument. But she smiled to herself, knowing the truth. Some things could not be measured in money. Some things, like the connection between a musician and her instrument, or the story behind an old piano, were priceless. She played every day, sometimes quietly, sometimes with bursts of energy, letting the piano guide her fingers and inspire her creativity. Every practice, every melody, every chord felt like a step towards something bigger, though she didn't yet know what that would be. She only knew that she was ready, that she had the piano, the music, and the heart to keep moving forward. And so, with $150 and a lot of hope, she had started a journey that would take her far beyond what she ever imagined, all beginning with a simple decision to invest in her dream, no matter how modest her means. Little did she know, that same piano, once touched by greatness, would soon change her life in ways she could never have expected. She had been playing her $150 piano for months now, and every day it felt more like a part of her life. The scratches on the keys didn't bother her. In fact, they seemed to tell a story. Every dent, every faded note whispered of the people who had touched them before her. And the more she played, the more she realized that this piano was different from any other instrument she had ever known. It wasn't just a collection of keys and strings. It had a voice, a personality, and strangely a soul. One evening, as she practiced a melody she had been working on for weeks, a thought suddenly struck her. She had read a few lines about her favorite musicians, those who had shaped her love for music, and something she had skimmed over before now felt important. Could it be that her piano had a connection to someone extraordinary? Her curiosity got the better of her. She grabbed her laptop and started searching online, using every detail she knew about the piano, the make, the year, and even the seller's notes. Hours passed as she dug through forums, old news articles, and music history websites. Just when she was about to give up, she stumbled upon a story that made her heart skip a beat. It was a small mention in an old interview. A famous singer, someone whose voice had inspired generations, had once played a piano matching her exact description during a private studio session years ago. She read it again and again, unable to believe it. Her hands trembled slightly as she leaned closer to the screen, trying to absorb every word. The thought that the piano she had bought so cheaply could have been touched by greatness was almost too much to process. Her mind raced. Could it really be possible? Had she, by some incredible stroke of luck, brought home a piece of musical history? The $150 piano she thought was just a humble beginning might have once belonged to, or at least been played by, someone whose music she had admired since she was a child. The idea was thrilling, terrifying, and utterly inspiring all at once. She ran to the piano and touched the keys, pressing them lightly. She imagined the famous singer's hands doing the same, perhaps composing a melody, experimenting with notes, or simply feeling the wood under their fingers. A shiver ran down her spine. It felt surreal, almost like the piano was alive, waiting for her to discover its story. From that day forward, her practice sessions felt different. She played with more intention, as though she were communicating with the past. Every note she struck was no longer just about learning a song or improving her skill. It was about connecting with the legacy of music, with the countless hours of creativity and passion that had once brushed against these keys. Her mother noticed the change immediately. "You've been sitting at the piano for hours," she said one evening, peeking into the living room. "What's going on?" "I found something," she replied, her voice barely above a whisper. "I think this piano might have a history. Someone I've admired, someone incredible played it before." Her mother frowned slightly, but she could see the excitement and awe in her daughter's eyes. She sat down quietly on the sofa, sipping her tea as her daughter began explaining what she had discovered. As the story unfolded, her mother smiled. "Well," she said gently, "it seems you found more than just a piano. You found a connection to something bigger than yourself." The young woman nodded, her fingers brushing over the keys, almost reverently. She felt a new responsibility. This piano was no longer just an instrument, it was a treasure. It was a bridge to the past, to the music she loved, and to the artist who had inspired her dreams. From that day onward, she approached her practice with a new mindset. She experimented with melodies she had never dared try before. Letting her creativity flow freely, she would play late into the night, imagining herself in a studio with the famous singer, as if they were both creating music together across time. Her friends began to notice a change in her. She seemed more confident, more focused, and yet more humble. There was a quiet joy about her that wasn't there before, a glow that came not from attention or praise, but from the deep satisfaction of feeling connected to something meaningful. One afternoon, she invited a local music teacher over to see the piano. She wanted someone with experience to hear it and perhaps confirm what she already suspected, that this piano was special. The teacher, a kind older man with years of experience, sat down and played a few notes. He looked at her with wide eyes and a smile. "This is an unusual piano," he said. "The tone? It's remarkable. I haven't heard anything quite like it in a long time. It's not just about age. It's the way it resonates. Whoever played it before, they left something behind in its sound. It's like the piano remembers them." She listened, almost holding her breath. Could it be true? Could the piano actually hold the echoes of past performances? Of someone she had idolized for years? She played a few notes herself, feeling the same warmth and resonance. It was as if the piano responded to her differently now, recognizing her touch, her dedication, her love for music. Over the next few weeks, she began documenting what she learned. She recorded her practice sessions, wrote down her observations about the piano's quirks, and even tried to trace the piano's history through old records and archives. Each discovery added to her sense of wonder. The piano wasn't just a second-hand bargain. It was a piece of living history, a witness to music and artistry that spanned decades. Her connection to the piano started to change the way she saw her own potential. If a simple piano could have such a story, then perhaps her own journey could hold more than she had imagined. She began composing her own pieces, small songs at first, each one inspired by the idea that music was timeless and that every note she played carried a story forward. There were moments of doubt, of course. Sometimes she would question herself, was she really good enough? Did her music matter? But each time she would sit at the piano, press the keys, and feel a quiet strength that seemed to come from somewhere beyond herself. The piano had become her teacher in ways no lesson ever could. It had taught her patience, resilience, and the magic of believing that something ordinary can be extraordinary. Her mother watched quietly, always supportive but never intrusive. She noticed how her daughter would disappear into the music, losing herself for hours at a time. Sometimes the young woman would come back from these sessions with tears in her eyes, not from frustration but from awe. She had touched something that made her heart expand, that made her feel small and large at the same time, connected to a world she had only dreamed of before. Then came a moment that would forever change the way she saw her piano. She was playing a new melody she had written herself, letting her fingers wander across the keys when she paused suddenly. There in the quiet resonance of the final chord, she felt something familiar. It was a feeling she couldn't explain, a shiver of recognition, a heartbeat of history that seemed to echo back to her. For a brief second, it was as if the famous singer she had admired was there with her, smiling, encouraging her, leaving behind the imprint of passion and artistry. The experience filled her with an almost overwhelming gratitude. She realized that her journey with the piano was no longer just about learning or practicing. It was about connection, across time, across space, and across the hearts of those who had loved music before her. She was part of a story far bigger than herself, and that knowledge gave her courage she had never felt before. From that day forward, she approached her music with a quiet confidence. She no longer measured herself against others, nor did she obsess over perfection. Instead, she let the piano guide her, trusting that her passion and dedication were enough. Every note, every chord, every melody was a tribute to the instrument that had changed her life, and to the unseen hands that had once played it before her. She began to share her story with close friends, carefully explaining how a simple $150 piano had led her to this discovery. They were amazed, and some were skeptical at first, but the emotion in her voice was undeniable. They could see that this was more than just luck or coincidence. It was a journey of perseverance, curiosity, and love. Her days started to fill with new ideas. She experimented with different styles of music, combining classical techniques with her own modern twists. She wrote songs that told stories of hope, resilience, and wonder. And every time she played, she thought about the connection she now felt to the past, the famous singer, and the countless musicians who had poured their souls into music long before her. The piano, once just a humble purchase, had become a gateway to something she had never expected. It reminded her that even small choices, made with heart and intention, could lead to discoveries far beyond imagination. And as she played, she understood that the real magic wasn't in the fame of the past or the history of the instrument. It was in her own hands, in her ability to create, connect, and continue the story that the piano had begun so many years ago. Little did she know that this was only the beginning. The piano, with its unexpected history and hidden charm, would soon open doors she had never dreamed of, and lead her into experiences that would forever change her life. But for now she was content to sit, to play, and to listen, to hear the echoes of the past and feel the pulse of her own heart in every note. Months passed since she discovered the incredible history of her piano, and her life began to change in small, subtle ways. She still practiced every day, but now there was a sense of purpose behind her playing. Every note felt like part of a conversation, not just with the piano, but with the music she loved and the legacy it carried. The 150 instrument that she had once thought of as a modest purchase had become her most treasured companion, and she treated it with care, respect, and admiration. One afternoon, she received an unexpected message from a local community center. They were hosting a small music showcase and had seen her post a video of herself playing online. The organizer, impressed by her talent, invited her to perform. At first she hesitated. She had never played in front of an audience before, not in a formal setting. She had practiced alone for so long that the thought of performing in front of strangers made her stomach churn. Her mother noticed her hesitation. "You've been playing beautifully for months," she said gently. "Maybe it's time to share your music with others." "I don't know," she admitted. "What if I mess up? What if I ruin it?" Her mother smiled. "Music isn't about perfection. It's about heart. And you have that in abundance." The words stayed with her, giving her the courage she needed. She agreed to perform, deciding that even if she was nervous, it was an opportunity she couldn't pass up. For the next few weeks, she practiced tirelessly, learning how to manage her nerves, refine her pieces, and bring out the emotion in every note. Her connection with the piano deepened even further. It was no longer just a practice instrument. It had become a partner, guiding her through each melody and helping her tell her story through music. The day of the showcase arrived. She carefully carried her piano to the small venue, her hands trembling slightly. As she set up, she noticed other musicians preparing around her. Some were older, some younger, and all seemed confident, polished, and ready to perform. She felt a wave of doubt wash over her. Was she really ready for this? Could a girl with a second-hand piano hold her own among these performers? When it was her turn, she walked onto the stage with the piano behind her, taking a deep breath. The audience was small, but she felt their eyes on her, waiting. She sat down, closed her eyes for a moment, and let her hands rest on the keys. Then she began to play. At first, her fingers moved cautiously, almost shyly. But as the music flowed, she felt herself melt into it. The audience was silent, listening to the sound that came from her piano, a sound rich with emotion, history, and heart. She remembered the stories she had uncovered about the instrument, the idea that someone she had admired had once played it, and the connection made her fingers more confident, more expressive. By the time she finished, there was a moment of stunned silence. Then the audience erupted into applause. She felt tears prick her eyes as she looked at the faces around her, strangers yet so moved by the music she had created. It was the first time she had truly felt the power of her piano reach beyond her home, beyond herself. After the performance, several people came up to her. Some complimented her technique, others remarked on the emotion in her playing, and a few asked about her piano. When she told them it was a second-hand instrument she had bought for $150, they looked incredulous. How could such a simple, inexpensive piano produce such a beautiful sound? She smiled quietly, feeling proud of the instrument and the connection they shared. One woman, a local music teacher, leaned closer and said, "You have something special. It's not just your skill, it's your feeling for the music. Keep playing, keep creating. You have a gift." The praise stayed with her, but more importantly, it gave her a sense of confidence she had never had before. The piano, once a humble dream, was now a bridge to new opportunities, a way to share her passion and touch the lives of others. Back at home, she spent the next few days reflecting on the experience. The showcase had opened her eyes to the possibilities beyond her living room. She realized that music wasn't just something to practice in private. It could be a way to connect with people, to inspire, and to create change. She also understood that her journey with the piano had been about more than talent. It had been about curiosity, perseverance, and the courage to invest in herself. Her mother watched her closely, noticing a newfound determination. "You've grown so much," she said one evening. "The piano has always been here, but now it seems like it's helping you find your place in the world." "Yes," she replied. "I never imagined something so ordinary could become so extraordinary." The following weeks brought more opportunities. She was invited to perform at local events, and her online videos began to attract attention. People were fascinated by the story of her piano, the history, the affordability, and most importantly, the way she played it. They didn't just see a young musician. They saw a story of persistence, passion, and magic hidden in everyday life. One day while practicing, she received a message from someone claiming to have information about the piano's past. It was from the family of the famous singer she had admired. They confirmed what she had suspected. Her piano had indeed been part of a studio session decades ago. She could hardly believe it. Her fingers trembled as she played a chord, feeling the resonance of history, and a deep sense of connection washed over her. The knowledge filled her with awe, but it also came with responsibility. This piano wasn't just hers. It was a living part of music history. She needed to honor it, to nurture it, and to make the most of the gift she had discovered. Every note she played was now a tribute to the past, a message to the present, and an inspiration for the future. As her performances grew more confident, she began composing her own pieces inspired by the piano's history. She experimented with different styles, blending classical techniques with modern influences, creating melodies that told stories of hope, struggle, and discovery. Her music began to carry a message, and she found joy in knowing that it could touch people in ways words never could. Her small home, once filled with quiet practice sessions, became a hub of creativity. Friends and neighbors would stop by to hear her play, and the piano became a symbol of dreams realized, of ordinary beginnings leading to extraordinary outcomes. Her mother continued to support her, always encouraging but never pushing, proud of the young woman who had learned to listen, create, and share. Yet, Despite the growing recognition, she remained humble. She knew that her journey was just beginning. The piano had brought her this far, but there were still many lessons to learn, many melodies to discover, and many audiences to inspire. She realized that greatness didn't come from talent alone. It came from heart, persistence, and the courage to believe that even the smallest investment, like a 150 piano, could lead to something unimaginable. One quiet evening, she sat at the piano and reflected on her journey. She remembered the first time she had touched it. Unsure if it would be worth the money, she thought about the research she had done, the discovery of its connection to the famous singer, and the first showcase that had introduced her music to the world. Each step had been filled with doubt, hope, and wonder, and each step had led her closer to understanding the power of her passion. Her fingers moved gently across the keys, playing a new melody she had written. It was soft, thoughtful, and full of emotion, a reflection of her journey, her dreams, and her gratitude. The piano responded beautifully, resonating with the depth of her feelings as if acknowledging her dedication and love. In that moment, she understood something profound. Music was more than sound. It was connection, legacy, and transformation. The next day, she received an invitation to perform at a larger local event. Her heart raced with excitement and nervousness. She knew that this was another step forward, another opportunity to share her music and her story. She smiled, thinking about how far she had come, from a girl saving $150 to buy a humble piano, to a musician connecting with history and inspiring others. And as she prepared, she felt the familiar warmth and encouragement of her piano, the invisible presence of the famous singer whose hands had once touched the same keys, and the quiet pride of her mother, who had believed in her from the beginning. She realized that she was ready, not just to perform, but to embrace the possibilities that awaited her, possibilities that began with a simple decision, a lot of heart, and the belief that music could change a life. After her first few performances, she began to notice that her music was starting to reach further than she had ever imagined. People were no longer just listening. They were remembering, feeling, and connecting with her stories through the piano. The small local showcase had been just the beginning. Slowly, invitations to perform at community events, school functions, and charity concerts began to trickle in. Each time she felt a mixture of excitement and nerves, but she also felt ready. Her confidence had grown alongside her connection with the piano, and she realized that she had something special that couldn't be measured by fear or doubt. Her mother noticed the change in her every day. She saw how focused and alive her daughter had become, how her music carried emotion and purpose. "It's amazing," her mother said one evening as they sat together in the living room after another long practice session. "You've taken something ordinary and turned it into something extraordinary. I'm so proud of you," she smiled, feeling a warmth spread through her chest. "It's not just me," she replied. "The piano, it's like it's alive. It's guiding me, and in many ways it truly was. Every day she learned something new, not just about music, but about herself. She began to experiment more boldly, trying techniques she had only read about or seen online. She would spend hours playing with rhythm and melody, sometimes creating music that sounded completely different from anything she had done before. And always the piano responded, as if encouraging her, testing her, and rewarding her dedication. One afternoon, she received a message that made her heart skip a beat. It was from a local music producer who had seen one of her videos online. The producer had been impressed by her technique, her style, and the story of the piano. He wanted to meet her, to hear her play in person, and perhaps explore opportunities to record her music. She stared at the message, her fingers trembling slightly as she held her phone. It felt surreal. A producer? Someone who could help her share her music with a larger audience? She read and reread the message, making sure it wasn't a mistake. But it was real. Her journey, which had started with a humble $150 piano, was about to reach new heights. Her mother noticed her excitement and gave her a reassuring smile. "Go for it," she said simply. "You've worked hard, and you deserve this." The meeting with the producer was both thrilling and nerve-wracking. She brought her piano, knowing it was an essential part of her story. When she began to play, she poured everything into the music, her years of practice, her love for the instrument, and the story behind it. The producer listened intently, nodding along, clearly captivated by the sound. "This piano," he said finally, "is incredible. And you're playing? It's raw, emotional, and unique. You have a gift. We need to capture this and share it with the world. Her stomach tightened with excitement. Could this really be happening? The piano she had found for a fraction of the price of most instruments was about to take her somewhere she had never dreamed of. She could barely believe that her life, once quiet and ordinary, was now opening up in such extraordinary ways. In the weeks that followed, she worked closely with the producer. They recorded her playing, experimented with different arrangements, and even began composing new pieces together. Each session was a learning experience, and she found herself growing as a musician, composer, and performer. The piano, which had once been a simple instrument in her living room, now felt like a partner in her creative journey, guiding her through every chord and melody. But it wasn't just the music that was changing her life. People were beginning to take notice of her story. The story of the 150 piano, the discovery of its history, and the way she had nurtured it into something extraordinary. Interviews, social media posts, and even local newspaper articles began to spread her journey. She was no longer just a young musician. She had become a symbol of what passion, perseverance, and curiosity could achieve. Despite the growing attention, she remained humble. She knew that fame was fleeting and that her true joy came from playing the piano, connecting with the music and sharing it with others. Yet the recognition brought new opportunities. Invitations to perform at larger venues, collaborate with other musicians, and even teach workshops started to fill her calendar. Her life was changing rapidly, and she sometimes had to pinch herself to believe it was real. One evening, after a long day of rehearsals, she sat at her piano and reflected on everything that had happened. She thought about the first day she had bought the instrument, unsure if it was worth the money. She remembered the discovery of its history, the first showcase, and the growing recognition she had received since then. Each moment had been a step forward, a piece of the puzzle that had brought her to this point. And yet, even as she looked ahead to the future, she knew that the journey was far from over. There were still new melodies to explore, audiences to reach, and experiences to embrace. The piano had taught her that greatness didn't come from talent alone. It came from heart, dedication, and the willingness to take chances, no matter how small. Her mother watched her quietly, proud of the young woman she had become. "You've come so far," she said softly. "And you've only just begun." She nodded, feeling a surge of gratitude. "I know," she replied, "and I can't wait to see where this takes me." The next performance was at a larger community hall, and the audience was bigger than anything she had ever faced. She carried her piano onto the stage, taking a deep breath as she looked out at the crowd. For a moment, doubt crept in, but then she remembered the journey that had brought her here. She thought about the $150 purchase, the discovery of the piano's history, and the countless hours of practice and discovery. She thought about the people who had inspired her, the music she loved, and the support of her mother. With a deep breath, she began to play. The music flowed effortlessly, each note filled with emotion, history, and heart. The audience was silent, captivated by the beauty of the performance. She could feel the energy in the room, the connection between herself, the piano, and everyone listening. It was a magical moment, one that confirmed what she had always felt, that music had the power to touch hearts, transcend time, and change lives. By the time she finished, the applause was deafening. People were on their feet, cheering, some with tears in their eyes. She smiled, feeling an overwhelming sense of joy and gratitude. She had started with a simple piano and a dream, and now she was standing on a stage sharing her music with the world. The journey had been long, filled with doubts, discoveries, and challenges, but it had also been beautiful, transformative, and unforgettable. That night, as she returned home, she sat at the piano in the quiet of her living room. She played a simple melody, one that she had composed herself, feeling the resonance of the instrument and the history it carried. She realized that this was just the beginning. There were still stories to tell, music to create, and experiences to embrace. But for now, she allowed herself to savor the moment, knowing that she had come so far, and that the piano, her faithful companion, would continue to guide her every step of the way. Her journey had taught her an important lesson. Sometimes, the smallest investments, the simplest choices, or the most ordinary things can lead to the most extraordinary experiences. A humble $150 piano had become a bridge to history, a source of inspiration and a pathway to a life she had only dreamed of. And as she sat there, fingers brushing over the keys, she knew that the best was yet to come. The months that followed her larger performances were a whirlwind of excitement, growth, and new opportunities. Invitations to perform kept coming from unexpected places. Local festivals, private events, even a few opportunities that promised wider audiences. Each event brought a mixture of nerves and anticipation, but she welcomed it all. Every time she played, she reminded herself why she had started this journey: the love for music, the connection with her piano, and the desire to share something meaningful with the world. One afternoon, she received an email that made her heart skip a beat. A renowned music hall, known for hosting some of the most influential artists of the time, wanted her to perform in a special showcase. The email mentioned that the organizers had seen her online videos and had been moved by the story of her piano, the history, the heart, and the unique way she played. They were offering her a chance to perform on a stage she had never imagined, in front of an audience that could include music professionals and critics from all over. She stared at the email in disbelief. The piano she had bought for $150, the same one she had practiced on quietly in her living room for years, was about to take her to one of the most important stages of her life. Her fingers brushed the keys, and for the first time in a long while, she paused and let herself dream a little bigger. Her mother, as always, was her steady support. "You've earned this," she said gently. "Just remember, it's not about perfection, it's about sharing your music. That's what makes you remarkable." The weeks leading up to the performance were filled with preparation, practice, and careful planning. She worked tirelessly on her pieces, experimenting with arrangements and adding touches of emotion and personality to each melody. The piano, which had already been her greatest teacher and partner, became even more central to her creative process. It responded to her touch with a depth and resonance that inspired her to push further, to express herself more fully than ever before. The day of the performance arrived, and she felt a combination of nerves, excitement, and gratitude unlike anything she had experienced before. She carefully transported her piano to the music hall, her hands trembling slightly as she adjusted it on stage. The lights were bright, and the audience was buzzing with anticipation. For a moment, she felt small in the grand space, but then she remembered the journey that had brought her here, the countless hours of practice, the first showcase, the discovery of the piano's history, and every little moment of doubt and perseverance along the way. As she sat down at the piano and let her fingers rest on the keys, she took a deep breath. This was more than just a performance. It was a celebration of everything she had learned, everything she had overcome, and the gift of music that had guided her life. When she began to play, the hall fell silent. The music poured out of her with a richness and depth that captivated everyone present. Each note carried a story. The story of her persistence, her discovery, and her connection to the piano's past. The audience listened, moved by the emotion and authenticity in every chord. She felt as though she was speaking directly to each person in the room, sharing a part of herself through the keys. In the middle of her performance, she noticed a small detail that took her breath away. Among the audience was a historian who had studied the life and work of the famous singer connected to her piano. They were leaning forward, eyes wide, clearly recognizing the history she had preserved and continued through her music. At that moment, she understood the significance of what she was doing, not just performing, but honoring a legacy, connecting the past and present through her own expression. When the final note faded into silence, the audience erupted into applause. It was the loudest, most heartfelt ovation she had ever received. People were on their feet, clapping, cheering, and some even crying. She felt tears stream down her face as she looked out at the crowd, realizing that this moment was the culmination of a journey that had begun with a simple $150 piano and a dream. After the performance, several people approached her. Some were music producers, others were journalists, and a few were fans who had followed her journey online. They complimented her skill, her emotion, and the story behind her piano. One of the producers even suggested recording an album, inspired by her compositions and the depth of her playing. She felt a sense of pride and disbelief. Her life had changed in ways she could never have imagined. That evening, as she returned home, she sat quietly at her piano. The room was still, and for a moment she let herself reflect. She thought about the day she had bought the piano, unsure if it was worth it, She remembered learning about its history, practicing in her living room and performing at small local events. Every step, every note, every moment of doubt had led to this incredible day. Her mother joined her, sitting on the sofa and watching as she ran her fingers gently over the keys. "You did it," she said softly. "You turned something ordinary into something extraordinary." She smiled, feeling a mixture of exhaustion and elation. "It wasn't just me," she replied. "It was the piano, and everything that came before, every little thing that led me here. I couldn't have done it without it." In the following weeks, her life continued to evolve. She began recording music professionally, collaborating with other musicians, and sharing her story on a much larger platform. The piano, once a simple instrument in her home, had become a symbol of her journey, a bridge between history and the present, and a source of inspiration for others who had dreams that seemed too big or impossible. Through it all, she remained grounded. She knew that success was not only about talent or opportunity, it was about heart, dedication, and the courage to embrace what seemed small but had the potential to be extraordinary. She continued to practice, compose, and explore new melodies, always mindful of the gift she had been given and the responsibility to honor it. One quiet evening, as she played a new piece she had composed, she paused and thought about the journey that had started so humbly. A $150 piano, a discovery of history, and countless hours of practice had led her to a life filled with music, connection, and fulfillment. She understood now that the true power of music was not only in performance or recognition, it was in the ability to touch hearts, create memories, and inspire others to believe in themselves. Her mother watched her, proud and quietly emotional. "You've done more than play music," she said. "You've shared a story and you've changed lives, including your own." She nodded, feeling a deep sense of gratitude. "I never imagined it could be like this," she said. "But I know now. It was always possible. I just had to take the first step." From that day on, the piano was not just an instrument, it was a companion, a teacher, and a reminder of what could happen when curiosity, passion, and courage came together. She continued to perform, compose, and inspire, but most importantly, she never forgot the journey that had brought her here. A journey that began with a simple thought, a modest purchase, and a dream. And as she played her music late into the night, she realized something profound. Sometimes, the smallest decisions, like buying a $150 piano, could lead to the most extraordinary, life-changing experiences. It wasn't just about talent, opportunity, or luck. It was about belief, dedication, and the courage to pursue what she loved. Her story became a reminder to everyone who heard it. Greatness could be found in ordinary places, and magic could exist in the simplest of things. All it took was a heart willing to see it, hands willing to create, and a spirit ready to embrace the journey, note by note, day by day, and dream by dream.